EQ Video Tip. I'm your host, Eric Forsetter. As always, thank you for joining for another terrific edition of this week's EQ Video Tip. Before we jump into this week's tip, let's review the goals of EQ Video Tip. What's on tap for this week? We have a great show, and it comes to us from Moshe Engelberg, and he's going to talk to us about how effective leaders have courageous conversations. And this is an excerpt of it from his book called The Amari Wave, and it's really important for us to have courageous conversations because as leaders, sometimes we have to have that difficult conversation and we put it off because we know there's a moment where we need to disagree and commit, or we know we have to tell someone some radical candor. And it's really hard because we don't want to hurt someone's feelings, or we know that they might be upset, or we know this may lead to some type of conflict. And let's face it, most people don't actually enjoy conflict. So Moshe is going to talk to us about a few different ways that we can help handle that conflict and ensure that we're going to have that courageous conversation that will help everyone out in the end. Tip number 1, recognize your operating assumptions. Be clear about what your attitude is going to be towards the conflict and how you expect to handle this hard resolution or hard outcome that may happen there as well. And also identify the worst and best potential outcomes that might happen, because you're going to have some anxiety going into this, and understanding what could happen or what might happen may alleviate some of the concerns that you may have. Remember, it's never easy to have a hard conversation with someone, but it's important to do that, because if you can make your expectations explicit with that person and understand what the operating assumptions are for that hard conversation, you'll identify and relieve some of the stress that you may have going into it, and ultimately end up helping both you and them out at the end. Tip number 2, be clear about where you stand. That means before you dive into this courageous conversation, write down the essence of your position and why you feel that way, and what boundaries are around that position as well. What's the justification behind it, and why you think it's important that you have this conversation with someone. In doing so, you'll have your argument more articulately sound and ready, so that it's not a opinion but more a matter of fact or data that you're going off of. Remember, it's important to take time to be clear and factual about where you stand, so that you can provide the person with data to help them understand why you're coming with this courageous conversation. Tip number 3, be clear about where you stand, and of course focus on connecting to the person through conflict so you can build trust with them. Of course, it's going to be very tough to have this conversation, but before you dive in and have this courageous conversation with someone, make sure you say that you appreciate the relationship and that you're here to help them out, and that this is not an attack on their character or attack on their personality or attack on their work, but you're in fact trying to recognize that there are limitations that everyone has, and you're trying to help build upon that and say it with kindness, with authenticity, so that you mean it. It's important that you set that level of trust and expectation from the get-go, so they understand that you are trying to build trust and you're initiating holding this conversation in a manner that will help them out, as opposed to something that will push them out the door. Our last tip, build skills into your organization for courageous conversations. Courageous conversations are hard to have, but if you give your team the right training behind it and give them opportunities to invest in their skills and actually take the time to promote courageous conversations, the team will start to have them. They will start to understand that it's an opportunity for skills development, not an opportunity to get mad at someone or to take their frustrations out. But instead, we're actually trying to build something together. That helps the entire team out. And let your team know that you're here to support them through that. And not every courageous conversation is going to go exactly as planned. But if you're here to support them, it will open up the entire organization to more trust and team bonding in the long run. That's a wrap for this week's EQ video tip. Hopefully these tips will help you when you need to have that courageous conversation. Remember, take the ones that you like, customize them for yourself, and understand that not all courageous conversations are easily had, but the more you practice and build your skill set, the better off you and your team will be in the long run. So that concludes our EQ video tip for today. Try incorporating some of these tips into your daily routine. But remember, use what works best for you and personalize it for yourself. Thank you always to our great research team for providing us with some great tips today. As always on EQ video tip, we want to end with gratitude. So thank you for watching. We really appreciate it. Here are some resources that you can use if you want more information on EQ going forward. Thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Thank you.